Hi there. I've uh, I haven't been lazy, but you haven't heard from me in a couple of days. But anyway, I'm back here now, and I thought I'll update you a little bit on what's been happening the last couple of days. Last I broadcast this was on the 4th of July, I think, and so today is already the 8th. There's been quite a few days without any broadcasts. But yeah, a few updates. On this Sunday, the 5th of July, we did an excursion, and that was quite interesting. We had quite a few. Well, first of all, we could not get to where we wanted to go because it was um, there was a control about, yeah, probably about 40 kilometers outside of Lima. And it turns out that it was still not totally okay to travel beyond the um, the province um, the province border. This means that the next province is Waral, I think, and we were going to Waral, and we were not allowed to pass there, even though we had done, one seat in the middle was annulated. Is that a word? Was not in use, so we only used like two seats in each row, and so we were in total five people in the car, in the vehicle, in the van. But we could not pass that point, so we went back towards Lima again, and we ended up in one of the poorer districts of northern urban Lima, and went up into the mountains there, or into the hills, until this sort of all the constructions ended. And there was another lomas there with some cactus vegetation. And we had not a lot of birds, but it was very good birds. We had, for instance, Cactus canastero and Raimondus yellowfinch, two very good Peruvian endemics. And we also had dark-faced ground tyrant, which is a migrant from the south this time of year. So all in all, it was quite successful. And then we ended up at Pantanos de Ventanilla, which is a wetland north of Lima, on the way back, and we had a good day. And that was my first full day of birding since this COVID-19 started. So it was quite a change. I drove as well, and yeah, it was. We started a little bit late. We had met up for 7:30, but it was almost 8:30 or so before we actually left Lima, and we were back here around 5:20 or so in the afternoon. And so I will continue be doing these weekend excursions, half day and full day, and hopefully we get some people signing up for next week. There are still a lot of the reserves that are not open, so it means that we cannot have access to all the reserves. But hopefully by Sunday, Saturday, Sunday this week, there will be more places open. This Sunday we're going south to another lomas. Lomas are these sort of coastal hills where you have the fog coming in this time of year. There's in the cold season. The Humboldt Current is very cold right now, so we have a lot of humidity in the air, and this condensates in the hills, and that's where the plants and get their water, and obviously it sort of springs up with a lot of life this time of year. In Lomas de Paraíso, where we visited on Sunday, it was still very dry, but hopefully going to Lomas de Asia, south of Lima, on this Sunday will be a little bit more, more humid and more green. And we get a lot of, there's one of the lilies that flowers this time of year that is quite spectacular, a yellow lily called Amancay, and it's sort of a very typical flower of these lomas this time of year. So we hope to see a few of that, and maybe some additional birds that we did not see last weekend, like thick-billed miner perhaps, and coastal miner, and a few other things. I'm also doing like 2 half-day tours, one to Pantanos de Villa on the morning on Saturday, and the other one to Cieneguilla, which is like the next valley south of Lima. It's in the Lurin Valley, and it's like a sort of middle class suburb to Lima, but they have a lot of green areas around there, and it's good for a lot of birds that we don't get here in urban Lima, like green kingfisher, pine-crested tit-tyrant. There's also the rufescens race of brown-colored flycatcher, which should be split in a good species. And we get also the modesta race of white-crested elenia, which is known as Peruvian elenia, if they would split that one as well. It's a mostly it's in Lima, but apparently it does migrate also inland. So there's not a lot known about the migration of this species, but hopefully we'll find it here also in this Cieneguilla Valley. Right. Another thing I've been occupied with this week, and part of the reason why I haven't updated on these vlogs that much, I've been starting my old project. This is like I'm starting this every couple of years or so. It's the 1,000 Best Birds project. I had an idea. I wrote a blog post about it in 2009. Can you imagine? It's 11 years now. But rather than sort of trying to get all the birds in the world, why not just concentrate on the best birds? So if you make a list of the 1,000 best birds, what would be in it? And I've had a few tools that I've mainly some books and some that I've grown up with as a birder as well, and I've linked and some newer ones, and they basically deal with all the birds in the world. And I link to all these on my Amazon page. You can check that out. It's amazon.com/ is it shop? I'll always have to look this up. It's /shop/engblom.gunner. And so the books I'm using are a classic from 1961 called Birds of the World, right? And it's by a guy named Oliver Austin Jr., who's made the text. And it's the fantastic, amazing illustration, but by legendary Arthur Singer. You should really check this out if you haven't. I think a lot of you have the book. It's one that, one of these table books that were on sale, and it's been mass produced. It has several editions as well. I think my edition is from was it like 1980 or so, or 1981. So and it's in Swedish actually, so it's translated to a lot of languages as well. A great book, and that is like my core book to decide which species should be on the 1,000 birds, right? And then I complement with another book, and it's the Encyclopedia of Birds, and it's put together by Christopher Perrins. This came out in I think it was 1991 and or 1990 or so. And it's also come up with various different editions, and both are obviously out of print, but you can get them cheap on eBay, on Amazon.com, and secondhand. But both have beautiful illustrations, and I sort of get all the sort of major birds that are depicted there, and look very cool. And I guess me, like a lot of other people, we've been sort of thumbing through these books and just looking at the birds, and I want to see that one and that one and that one. I want to see all of them. So one of my earliest goals as a birder was to see whether I could see all the birds in that the Birds of the World by Singer. And so this project is part of that, right? Now, I have a few other ideas that I want to include in this sort of the best birds, because I think you should also try to do something for the birds that need our attention in terms of the threatened and critical and endangered species on the planet. So I'm using the BirdLife list for this, and so all the birds that are sort of doable, reasonably doable to try to see. There are a lot of critical ones that have very few records and are virtually next to impossible to see. There's also several that are on inhabited islands in the Pacific that are so much off limit that it's prohibitive to try to see them for most people. There are occasional cruises, of course, with heritage expeditions and others that go to these islands, but extremely expensive and certainly not for everyone. I did not want to include those in this 1,000 birds to see, even though they may be to some extent very much wanted, just because they're so difficult for some people. One that comes to mind is like Tuamotu sandpiper. I don't think I ever will go and see that one, but who knows? But maybe not super sexy anyway. But there are, of course, others that are also on islands that are quite sexy. I mean, you have all those beautiful Pacific lorikeets, and most of those you can actually get to with. It's not going to be cheap, of course, but you can fly to the area and so forth. And other areas, I was sort of pondering whether I should include it or not. So I found I'm like at species 300 now of the 1,000 that I'm putting together, and so one that came up was Sumatra ground cuckoo, and that involves like a week-long hike on Sumatra, or at least a couple of nights hike, and still you're not sure that you will see it, but it's up there. But it's also an expedition. If you do that kind of an expedition, you will incentivize the local people to actually care for the area. All these areas are very much threatened from deforestation. So if there is a possibility to see the bird in an area that is threatened by deforestation, and it's a critical or an endangered bird, it will be on my list. And it doesn't really have to be that sexy. Maybe really off the beaten track, but if it's possible and it's not dangerous to go there, like in a war zone or something, then it should be included. So we'll see how many birds I end up with in the end. As I said, I'm on like 300 now. I've only gone through like 25 families, so but and some families are of course with only one species. So that's the fourth item that I'm including here also. Bird families. Every bird family should have at least one species included. And this makes it somewhat also, you have to sort of measure how many birds of each family you should include. Should I include 3 kiwis or just one? Even though there's like 3 kiwis depicted in 3 different species, or five altogether on New Zealand, of course. But there are 3 depicted in parents and the singer volume together. But maybe, it's this. I mean, I went to New Zealand 2 years ago, and I felt we only went for 1 kiwi, of course, but I think the experience is sort of similar regardless which one you see. So I opted to just stick to 1. So 1 is any kiwi does it, right? And then I could actually add some other more spectacular birds. And the same goes with swifts. I'm not sure that I should include a lot of swift species in these 1,000 best birds when there are so many cool hummingbirds, for instance, right? And tanagers. So maybe 1 swift will suffice. and then we can include more colorful and spectacular species instead. We'll see how it ends up in the end. But it's an interesting project, and I invite you to follow along as this sort of folds up and folds out, and yeah, we'll see how many species we end up in at the end. Some news about COVID-19 here in Peru. The domestic flights, they will start on the 15th. And I think that also means that we will be starting being able also to travel a little bit further afield from here in Lima. So right now I cannot go up to Santa Eulalia Canyon as far as I understand. And there was a problem going north to Lomas de la Chay, etc. So hopefully by the 15th we can do a little bit longer excursions in the weekends. Now, one good news here about the flights is that it was cleared that it will not be necessary to do 15 days of quarantine, like has been the rule previously. So if anyone would come from abroad to Peru, like in a repatriation flight, they would have to have 2 weeks of quarantine. That is no longer the case. So if they are allowed to fly, and that will also be the rule when international flights are open, there will be no quarantine when you come to Peru, right? If you are allowed to fly from the country, your temperature will be checked, of course, when you go on board, and also when you arrive to Peru. So if your temperature is okay, you will be allowed in. So that is good news. So if we say then that the internal flights are starting on the 15th of July, let's calculate maybe 6 to 8 weeks before international flights. That looks promising, yeah. So maybe we'll have flights by the end of August, early September, in the best case scenario. Very likely not from all over the world. There will certainly be areas and passports that will be banned depending on how the situation folds in different areas, and that we don't know anything about yet, right? But we can hope that we can get birders coming from, let's say, end of August, early September, and to be on the safe side, let's say from mid-September to early October. And I already have some people actually wanting to go that time of year. So if you are interested from say mid-September, let me know. We have there's a guy that is very interested in doing a central Peru tour and doing the white sand forests, etc., in Iquitos area. And so he is coming. I mean, if there is if there is a possibility from the UK, he will be coming. And I also have a few other things listed on the website. So have a check that out. We'll see how that goes. And let me see. And regarding Central Peru and the Iquitos area and also Northern Peru, I have a few confirmed program for July, August next year as well. So you may want to check those out on the website. There are 3 people booked for most that part, and you can sort of fill up the group there if you like, and start planning for that already. I think that was, let me see, how much else? Yeah, that was pretty much it. So I'll see you here on my next broadcast. Don't know when it will be, but hopefully soon. And until then, bye.